we're going to be learning a bunch of different technologies and tools and testing techniques. We're going to be trying to go very broad and touch a bunch of different topics instead of going very deep. That way to just kind of give you guys more tools in your tool belts. You're going to learn API testing, how to test a React web app using different types of tests, like end-to-end UI tests, visual cross-browser, and then we're going to put it all together and run it through CICD with GitHub Actions. These are the technologies that we're going to use. In order to get set up here, what you're going to want to do is navigate to this repository, and then you want to make sure you get your free Sauce Labs account. So you're going to go there and sign up. I hope most people already have a Sauce Labs account, but if not, no big deal. Go ahead. It's absolutely free, no commitment or anything. Go ahead and sign up because we're going to be using Sauce Labs for a few things here. Once you sign up, you're going to need to get your Sauce Labs username and access key. I'll show you exactly how to do that. So you'll come here and click on this link. I'm going to do everything together. So I'm going to log in. And then you can see that I'm in my user settings. Okay, if you're just logged in, you can access your user settings by clicking on this person and going to user settings. And then here is your username. Okay, you can just grab that. And here's your access key. So now make sure you save those. Just put them in like a notepad or whatever. So now that you've got those, okay, most people here won't have Screener account. No problem. You'll be able to use one of these API keys that I got for us for Screener. I recommend pick like a random one. Don't pick the first one because I think everyone is going to try to pick the first one. And so now you're going to have basically three things that we're going to be adding to our Gitpod repository. There are really two ways to get set up, but the easiest for 99% of us, unless you're very comfortable with your JavaScript environment and you have Node installed, you have NVM installed, if you know what that means, then you can definitely do local development. Those instructions are down here. If you want to do local development, totally can. But the problem, of course, there is we deal with environmental issues, access issues, and all of that. So for most of us, we'll be doing coding through Gitpod, which will basically be an environment in the browser. And so the way we're going to do the Gitpod setup is you're first going to make sure you have a GitHub account. So go ahead and sign up or log in. Let me copy this link. Sign up and log in, okay? And then you're going to fork the repository. Let's do that together. I'm going to fork it. So you click the fork. And then I'm going to be fork it to, oh, unfortunately, I already forked it, as you see, to my own account, okay, to Anand Balot. It's not under here, okay? So I forked it, and we'll continue from there. After you fork it, you're going to grab this little URL right here. I'm going to copy it. Copying it right now, and I'm going to go to my fork. So here's going to be my fork, right, under my username. You'll have your fork under your username. And very important for everyone that did the setup beforehand, please don't forget to get latest. And you can get latest by go to the root directory, and then you'll have fetch upstream button. Again, I usually do this through CLI. So now I got the latest code. Remember the little piece of code that I copied? We're just going to come here to the beginning of the URL right before HTTPS, and you're going to paste that in. So your URL looks like this. This is the part that I pasted in. And then the rest of it should be your repo here. So now that you got your Gitpod in front of here, you just hit enter. And then this is going to open up in Gitpod. It's going to start creating a new environment for you. It'll probably ask you to log in with GitHub. So just go ahead and do that. And this will take like 5 minutes to build and start. And so it's going to build. It's going to run some like sanity tests. And it's basically going to ensure that your environment is in a good state. Okay, there we go. So just click that button. Don't wait for pre-build. And now you can see it's preparing. Let that run. Oh, there we go. This one is building an image. There we go. This one is up. Awesome. All right. So this one is up. So you'll see it's going to come up and it's going to run some Cypress tests. So that'll kind of ensure that Cypress is working in your environment. And then once that's up, we're going to set our environment variables like this. So I'll show you all how to do that in a second. So Cypress tests will go really fast. Fantastic. They all passed. API test passed. LocalHost is up and running. There should be this LocalHost. You can command click it, and then it'll open up this little amazing web application in your LocalHost. This is the URL. Just by navigating to one of these areas here and command clicking it, okay? And then if we go back to our other terminal, now that everything's set up, you're just gonna run these commands. Right, so whatever your username is, you're gonna supply it, right? And then it works by, if you want to echo one of them, you'll be able to see the value like this. So see, it comes back with the value that I just entered. That's how you know it works. So you'll do that for all three keys. So you'll just do source access key after, which you'll just enter your access key, and then you'll just enter screener API key again, and then enter all of those. And then once all of those are entered, which for me they're not, or actually they might be. Here, let me quickly, because this is a previous environment I've set up. So let me try to echo like this guy, for example. If it is, then my test will work for me too. Cool, it is. So it works for me. So after you've done all that, you just run in one of the data centers, okay? Whether you're in US or in EU. So I'm in US, so I'm just gonna run this script. All it's basically gonna do is run a WebDriver IO test against our local host application, which is this guy right here. Here's the documentation of how to actually use the API. With REST APIs, it's very important to have documentation to understand how to use it. One of the concepts of APIs is they should be self-documenting. A lot of times that's not the case, but here they have beautiful guides to help us understand that. So check it out here. For example, they're showing us how to get a resource, right? If you do a get here, this is the output that you would expect. If you would want to see all the resources available, so here, for example, we're going to be checking all of the posts. This would be the output that comes out, okay? So there's creating and so on and so forth. Here are some of the resources that we have available, right? So for example, you can get posts, you can see comments, you can see albums and so on and so forth. So for example, if I just open this up here and go to posts, it comes back as a JSON collection of all of the different types of posts that are available. Of course, everything here is dummy, so this is just kind of what everything looks like, right? If you want to see like all the comments, right? There's 500 comments, it says. So this is what a comment looks like, right? Just comes back as JSON objects with a bunch of information for those JSON objects. Okay, and then here, it talks about all the routes that are available. You can do get, posts, put, patch, and delete. And then you would hit these endpoints. We'll cover all of this in depth. API testing is basically validating that the data on the back end comes back correctly based on a request that we send. So I found this pretty good picture here that kind of shows a diagram of how that works. Right, so you could have like the client, right, which is the browser or a mobile device, browser on a mobile device even, or even just without a browser. These will perform an HTTP request, and this HTTP request will go to some kind of a web service. What we've seen here with these things, these are web services, okay? And these web services will hit the database. They'll come back to you with a response in a JSON or an XML schema. Nowadays, pretty much all the modern APIs come back in a JSON format. Back in the day when we were starting to build APIs, they were coming back in XML. But I would say don't worry about XML in general, because it's just a kind of outdated format that web APIs don't really use anymore. So it comes back in JSON format, and based on what you requested, you get back some kind of a response. Some responses that you can get back are like, hey, your request was okay. Here is the data. If you requested some data, you'll get back some data. Or sometimes you don't want to request any data, you just want to check something, and then you can just get a response code. There's also other response codes, such as you did something incorrect, so you would get something like a 404, for example, if your resource wasn't found. Or you might get like a 500 error code if your, for example, application is down. There are many types of error codes. Let me show you all that signify different things from your web service, right? So you can see here all the different types of status codes that exist and how they're kind of numbered, right? And so you kind of know that anything from 100 to 199 is an informational response. 200 to 299 are like success responses, and so on and so forth. Here you can see anything in the 500s is a server error, and anything in the 400s is a client error. Well, we're going to cover all of this. Don't worry if you're confused. So there are some very common API methods that are used in a lot of our applications that we're working on today. The major ones that you'll use the majority of the time are get, which retrieves information from the client service, right? So in this case, when I click this here, that's a get. It hits this URL, and then it does a get request, and then this request returns me this information. There's a put that will update some kind of a resource. A put, I can't demonstrate to you all through the browser. We'll need a special client to be able to do that, but I'll show you all how to be able to do a put. Put is an update. The way I remember, put has a U in the middle, so it means update the resource, right? If for whatever reason you had this resource and you wanted to say, I want to change the user ID of this first object to 200, for example, you would do a put, and then that would update. Then there's a post. A post creates a new record, right? So another example here, for example, we have 500 comments, right? So later you'll see that when we do a get on this, it'll come back with 500 objects. But if we wanted to add a new one, we would do a post on this endpoint with some information, and then that'll add a new object. And then finally, there's a delete. To delete, exactly as it says, delete a resource from whatever collection. There's also these other ones, head and patch, very rarely used, but these are the four most common ones. Some advantages of APIs and API testing. APIs are extremely fast. So I think a lot of us here are familiar with end-to-end UI tests. End-to-end UI tests, depending on how you write them, right? Maybe you write them with Cypress, they can run in like a second or two. If you writing them with like Selenium and not hitting localhost, they may run in like 10 to 20 seconds. Some people have much longer tests than that. API tests run in milliseconds, right? One web request can take like 100 milliseconds, 150 milliseconds. So they're drastically faster than like end-to-end tests. Also, they're a lot more reliable because we don't have to deal with so much technology on top of the API, like browsers and rendering and CSS and JavaScript and so on and so forth. We don't have all the typical issues that we face with end-to-end UI testing. And instead, for example, if I wanted to check, does my database contain the correct amount of posts? Instead of checking that on the UI, I can just hit this API, check, oh, it has 100 posts, and then I'm basically good to go. 150 milliseconds, extremely stable test. And then they allow us to check the business logic of the app, which is kind of exactly what I talked about. We already reviewed the software that we're going to be testing. Cool. Now, at this point, I want you all to try to do a get with me. We'll do it together, okay? You can go to this URL, And then once you're here, okay, we'll open up a network tab. So you'll come here, right click and inspect. And then you'll come here to the network tab. Okay, it should be empty. If it's not, you can just clear it by clicking the clear button. Okay, so now that it's empty, if we, for example, click on this or click on this, I'll click on this. Actually, I want to follow the same instructions you all were doing. We're going to just paste this into our browser. So take this and paste it into the browser like this, and then hit enter. And in here, you're going to start to see a bunch of web requests happening, right? So here are all the web requests. We can see that over here, for example, this comments document web request happened, and it has a status of 304. So if we click this comments right here, we'll see a response that came back. You'll see this response in the browser. The same thing shown us here in the network tab. You'll see some headers, right? So here in the headers, you'll see that the method that we performed was a get. So basically, anytime you're clicking on stuff, clicking on links, that's a get request. And the get request returns some kind of a status code. In this case, it returned a 304, which means it's okay. You can see the URL, which we hit, right? Which was this comments URL. And then you can see here is what comes back to us from that request. It's a bunch of this data. We can dig really deep into all of this type of data and how it's structured. But again, I'm trying to go very broad and shallow for you all, just to give you all more tools in your tool belt. It has a bunch of different stuff. There are headers that exist with a web request as well. And then I already showed you all the response. So that's what a get looks like, right? The get is just going to a URL and then expecting a specific status code. So let me see one thing here I'm going to do if I refresh. Cool. All right. So that's a get. So let's do some automation. So here is the exercise. You can see it right here. Oh, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do a get in Cypress. And let me just quickly explain to you all the repository. Just a quick explanation of how the repo is laid out. Okay. So we obviously have our root repository here. Inside of our root repository, we have a Cypress folder. Inside of the Cypress folder, the way this was created is when you do npm install Cypress, this automatically gets created for us. And then we just fill it in with the tests that we want. Okay. All typical standard for Cypress is to put the tests in the integration folder. So that's where you're going to find tests. Also in here, you're going to see two more folders. There's an end-to-end folder, which we're not looking at now because we're working with the network folder. Okay. In the network folder, and for all the exercises here, you're going to see at least two files. One is going to be an exercise file. That's where you're going to go and perform your exercises. And then you're also going to see a solution file. That's where the solution to the problem exists. And so if for whatever reason you get stuck, or maybe I messed up the documentation, you can always go to the solution file and see what's in there. And then you'll actually even be able to run the tests and see how it works. Okay. So with that said, for the very first one, it's the easiest one of them all. You're going to come in here and just basically copy this test, and we'll do it all together. I'll go slowly here. I'm copying it. And then I'm going to come to my Gitpod. Let me drag it over here. And then under this URL, I'm going to drop it as a new test. Okay. Also, yeah, I think there was like a fifth of the people have used Cypress. So let me just cover some of the Cypress basics. Okay. This reference types up here, it basically provides us an IDE from Cypress. So for example, if we're doing something like expect, you can see that now we're getting this kind of information here from Cypress. And if you do like, let's put response body, you can see that we start getting this kind of IDE from Cypress. Super helpful to have you to be able to write our tests. Just a standard kind of JavaScript. There's this context block that wraps all of our tests into a single feature file. And then each of the id blocks is obviously a test case saying the name of the test, right? So kind of as we did before with our test, we are going to be doing a request on this base URL, which I've set up here. And then we're going to be hitting comments and then saying that the response should be a status code of 200. And then we're also going to expect the response to have a length of 500 or 501, because I guess sometimes that endpoint doesn't work 100% correct. So give this test a shot like this. And then if you want to run it, you would just run this spec like this. Okay, so we'll come here. Make sure you don't kill your other terminals. Open up a new terminal if you want. I'm going to clear here. Paste this command. So this is going to run a Cypress test, and it's pointing to this file here. And actually, it's pointing to all the spec exercise files, which there will be a few. We can do like this. 1 second. You can run all the tests if you want, but it'll probably be better if I do network, and then exercise spec. There you go. Hit enter, and it should run your tests. It should run the tests that are in here, which at the very least, we should expect this one to pass. Don't worry about the failures because the exercise file contains several things. What's important, if you scroll up a bit, okay, keep scrolling up, is that this one passes, the one that we just created. Does this pass for all of you? The most important is that this new one passes. Why wouldn't we expect the status of this test to return a 304? Let's do a 304, right? Just to see what that looks like. And then we'll come back here. Let me clear this just to move it up. And then let's rerun it. Same thing, same command. Cool. See how it failed? We'll give it a second to finish. So look, here is our test, right? Here's a failure. It's good to see failures. Assertion error. Expected 200 to equal 304, which was not the case. And then here's some details. This was the second one. So that's why it failed. And then you can see the failure here as well. So cool. Beautiful. All right. Let's try a post. Same thing. You all hands on keyboard. You're going to be doing a post. I'm going to move over to Visual Studio Code to start coding just because I think it's easier for me and easier for you all to look at. So I'm going to be there, but you all continue in Gitpod. For a post, there is a little catch. For other operations other than get, because a get doesn't require a body, it's easier to do them in a certain kind of client. You need a REST client. Postman is extremely popular. So you all can use Postman if you're familiar. I'm going to show you all another one because I did get you all to sign up for Sauce Labs. There's one that you don't need to download anything for. That's going to be API Fortress. So, and it's totally free. So if you just log into your Sauce Labs account, you can follow along with me. And then I'll go a little bit slower. And then you can come here to API testing on the left. I'm going to click it. Okay, I'm going to open it in a new tab. The reason why I'm using this again is just so you don't have to download anything, and I didn't make life more complicated for anybody. And so in here, what you can do is you can create a new project, okay? Give the project whatever name you want. I created this project and I called it JSON placeholder. Okay, so this is what mine looks like. I'm going to open it up. And then when you open it up, for everyone familiar with Postman, it'll look very similar to Postman. For those not familiar, I'll explain everything. And then there's this HTTP client up here in the upper left. Click that. And then that'll just basically allow us to do more complicated requests such as posts and puts and deletes. And so here is a post request. We've never done it manually, so I want to make sure I show it to you all. All right, so this is what a post looks like, okay? Whenever we want to do a post, remember that a post creates a new record in our system. So if we take a look at our system again, and let me pull this down, we can see a few areas where we can do posts. So our application says that we can do posts on these two. We can do posts on actually only one endpoint, this posts endpoint. Let's take a look at this posts endpoint together. If I come here and I paste this to the end, this will take me to the posts. And so these are the posts that come back when I do a get, right? I just did a get, came back with this information. And then if we look at our network tab and then come here to posts, and then we can look at the response and scroll down and scroll down. This is what the response looks like. And you can see that we have 100 different posts, okay? And if we wanted to add, let's say, another extra post, that's where we would use the post request, okay? And so you just select post here, type in the endpoint of the URL that you want to hit, okay? A post takes some kind of a body. How do we know which kind of body we need to provide? Well, our documentation is going to tell us that. So let me show you all this. If we go back here and then click the guide, it keeps going down. So listing all the resources, creating a resource. So you can see here, creating a resource, it shows a post, and then it shows the body that we need to provide, right? See the three things that it provided for the body, okay? And these are the things. I provided 4 things. I think the 4 things is okay too. If it's 4 things are not okay, our API will come back with an error code telling us that 4 things are not okay. And so once we add this body here on the right-hand side, we can do a send, and then it should come back with the appropriate status code. And so here you can see it came back with a 201 status code. 201 status code means created. I shouldn't have closed that page. A very common request. If we go to 200, 201 means created. So that's exactly the status code that we want to see from our application when we did something correct, right? And so it now added a new record to our application. Some things to note here about our application: it doesn't actually create the stuff in the application. It pretends to create the stuff, because imagine if everyone, I think they get like 1 billion requests a month or something. If everyone was creating stuff in their database, it would get full very quickly. So they just pretend to create it, but it doesn't actually create it. And if we were to do something wrong here, let's say we remove this. I don't know how the API will react, but let's see. If I was just to supply one of the values needed and we did a send, okay, that still worked. What if we did something like foo and did a send? Still works. Okay, everything works here. What if we send empty? So these are all kind of test cases that we actually can be writing for our application. Supplying invalid fields. What happens if we supply an empty body? Send. See, so our API accepts everything. Is that okay? I don't know. It depends on the documentation and whether that's expected behavior of our application. I wouldn't expect it to, at least receive an empty body for a post, but that's how the application acts. It says everything was created successfully. It gave it an ID. So according to the application standards, that's okay. Okay, cool. Try to automate the post by following the instructions here. They're getting a little bit more complicated because we all already did a test together. So just navigate to the folder and then follow the instructions in this test to make the test work. Okay, I'm gonna show you all here. So you're navigating to Cypress, integration, network, Exercise, and you'll be doing code here. It can create new users and posts. There are different ways to test responses, right? Like you can do like this. For example, just kind of some little tricks with Cypress. You can just check a property like this, or you can just check it directly on the object by doing like this. So that's something to try. You can try to change the status code to something else and see what happens when the test fails. And then the other thing that I want to show everyone while they're doing exercises, this is the one thing you can't do in Gitpod that I couldn't figure out how to do. But if you do npx Cypress open, for a lot of people that are new to Cypress, you get the nice GUI that Cypress provides. Give it a second to open up. So it gets, this GUI comes up, and give me a second, I'll show you. So, and then you can see it shows all of the tests that are here. And then, for example, if I click in our solution, it's going to execute all of those tests. So it's, you all are learning how to run it through CLI, which is super awesome. But there's also this GUI that you can use to run your tests as well. I think it's much more valuable in UI testing, but it also provides some information in API testing, right? So here's our first test that we coded. You can kind of see some of the assertions that we were making and then what the request was. If you're enjoying this tutorial and want to support this channel, be sure to hit the thumbs up button for the video. And if you want to be notified of every time a new tutorial is released, hit the subscribe button. So here is what the solution looks like right after I correctly renamed the test. Here's the request that we're making. All right, we can see we're supplying the post here. Right before we were doing a get. The get is easy because you just do a side out request. But then if you want to do a post or another type of method, hint, hint, you put it in here, supply that base URL with that and then the body, right? And then you get back your response. And if you, by the way, great trick. If you ever want to kind of see the response coming back, you can just console log it and see how to analyze it. So let me show you all here. So, and let me go to the console. So let me rerun these tests and I'll show you all what's coming back. So see how we got these objects coming back down here? These objects coming back. So that's how you can kind of inspect the object and what it looks like coming back from your web request and then decide which decisions to make. All right, so here's that object and you can see how we're interacting with it, right? The response status, we want it to be 201, right? So look here, if we look at here, a response dot status, we get back 201. You know, we can check if you want to check the status text, we can check the status text. You know, we can check any of these, right? And then of course, if you want to dig in to the body, you just need to go into the response.body object. Let's take a look at that guy, response.body. And now we can see the body has a number of attributes. And then in our case, we were checking the title, which is that guy. Cool. So it's kind of helpful to see that in the console a lot of times when I'm writing API tests for me to understand how to interact with it. But so let me show you all how to do that if you have everything locally. So I'm going to stop Cypress over here. Okay. So there's npx Cypress run to run the test basically in like headless mode. But then if you want to open the UI, you do npx Cypress open, and then it'll open up the Cypress UI. And so give it a moment. See a little Cypress coming up here. And then here's the UI. The UI is going to capture all of the folders that you have in your integration folder. And then you can see it's capturing all of them here. And then if you want to run anything, just click it. You can run everything if you want. You can run all of them here. For UI tests, you can switch your browsers here. I only have Chrome and Electron, but you can switch them here. For API tests, of course, that doesn't matter. So you can just click it and then it'll run the tests. So the last one is a put. Also requires a little UI to be able to work with it. But just to show you all the documentation on the put. So if we want to scroll down, right, we're no longer creating a resource. Remember, a put is to update the resource, right? And so in this case, if we wanted to update it, we would be updating one of the posts, right? So you can see now how the URL is starting to be built out. So in this case, you have the URL, right? The posts will give us back all of the posts that we had. Let's take a look at that here. And then if we want to get a specific one, you can put a 1 here, and that'll only return that object. Very common pattern to follow with web APIs, where you can get a whole collection, use that collection to get an individual item, and then you can even, target in on that, and then you can get into stuff like URL parameters at the end and so on and so forth. But this is how you get just the one post, okay? And then we're doing a put on this one post because we're updating it, right? And so what we're updating it to is this information here. So we're supplying a title foo and a body bar, and then that's pretty much it. And then they're console logging it, and then this is what the output looks like. So let's do that through our API Fortress. Follow along with me. You got the information right here. API Fortress. I already have my put in here. So this is what a put looks like, right? You're just changing the method that you're operating on, supplying the correct endpoint, supplying the correct body, okay? And then you're sending it. And then you get back a response. We got a 200 in this case. 200 means okay. Let me get rid of this. Show you all the 200. 200 means okay. The request succeeded, as you can see. Curious if we can break it to get a different response. No, everything will continue to work. But again, depending on your API's requirements, some things may or may not be allowed. And so then so when you do the put, we'll send it again. You can see there's the body that comes back, right? So it came back with the title, right, that we supplied, and then the body that we supplied, right? If we can do like using a put to send this one, it comes back with that one. Now, if this wasn't a dummy API that we could actually hit, when you perform a put operation, you can actually then just call a get on this, and you should expect it to be in the same exact state after you update it, right? So if we updated it with all this information, you should be able to just do a get on that and then send it, and it should come back with the same exact information. But of course, this being a dummy API, it doesn't actually update it. It just kind of fakes it. So keep that in mind. Whether you're doing a put or a post, right? If you're adding an item to a collection, if you had 10 items in a collection and now you added one, you should be able to do a get on that same connection and get back 11 items because you just added one. Cool. All right. Just to show you all what my solution looked like, and just replacing the put here, right, instead of the post. The body can be whatever you want in here, as we saw that from the API. I'm logging the response here, but then you can do, of course, as I mentioned, you can do like this, and then to equal something, or you can do response.status, depending on your preferences, and then get rid of this. I kind of like this way better. It's shorter, but maybe you like this because it's kind of more clear. I don't know. It's up to you. It's just a preference thing. I just wanted to show it, and then you can do it like that. And again, of course, you can analyze the object. Let me show you all. We can analyze the object here in the inspector. If you come to the console, let me rerun these tests. It'll be the second object, right? And then the second object is what that looks like, coming back with a different status code, right? Not a 201, which is created. It's just coming back with OK. And then you can see here's the body that it comes back with, which is exactly what we supplied. Cool. In your Gitpod, you should remember that you should be able to open up an app on localhost 3000. Yours won't open in localhost 3000, but remember, you should be able to click one of those links. Whenever mine opens, I'll be able to show you, but you should be able to click it, and then it should take you to a web app. For me, my web app looks like this. This is what the web app looks like. And it's just a very simple React web application. It's solely designed for us to practice testing. There we go. So yep, remember, if you want to open the web app, you can come here to the Remote Explorer, and you should have this port 3000 open. You can click this little globe, and then it'll open up the app. Okay. The other way to do it is here in this command line, in this terminal, you can just command click this localhost 3000 and open that up as well. Okay. Let's look at our application that we are going to be testing here. So this is our application, right? It's a very simple web app, has an image here, has this text here, and then has this URL. If we click it, and actually I'm just going to click it here. It just takes you to ultimateqa.com. This is going to be our testing strategy. We're going to go through this document. Here we have the expected behavior of our application. Here we're going to start testing each item one by one. We're going to decide which type of test we're going to use and which technologies we're going to use to test our application. So our application should obviously render, right? Very basic of a web app. The link should go to the correct location. So in our case, the correct location is just going to ultimateqa.com. The link should also open in a new tab. The app should look correct on Chrome in the most popular resolution, and also on Safari in the most popular resolution. This is as far as we're going to be able to get today. But just to give you all an idea that even such a simple web application, there is a lot more to testing it than just that. We can now start ensuring their application is accessibility friendly. We can do front-end performance testing on it. We can make sure that our application is secure, and potentially even a few other types of tests that I don't even know about. So you can see, just again, from such a simple app, there's a lot of testing to do. Cool. Our tests live in Cypress integration folder. Your exercise is to write a Cypress test to make sure that our application opens. In your IDE, you're going to go to Cypress integration end to end, and then exercise spec, and follow the instructions to implement this test. Okay. So go ahead and do that, and I'll show you all. We're done with the network tab. We're in network folder. We're going to be now only in the end-to-end folder. You're coming to exercise spec, and you're going to be doing all the work from there. And so you're implementing this test. To run your test, you do npm Cypress run, and then we would do end-to-end, and then you would do exercise. Yes. This is how you'll run the tests, and it should work without you having to change the URL. So see how it works? And this is our test running here in test looks like when it runs. And so now with Cypress UI, it's cool because you get these little interactions. I'm just going to move over to this one just to show you all. You'll have the similar experience, just not as nice UI, obviously, in Gitpod. But here's our test, right? You can see it tells us exactly one command at a time. Again, one of the reasons why I like Cypress, this comes out of the box, had to do zero work to make this possible. And then it kind of shows you what you need to do with the different kinds of elements and different kinds of actions and so on. Or if you're in Gitpod, you can just come here to Remote Explorer, open port 6080, and then it'll automatically open the UI. And then if you do npx Cypress open, this opens that little GUI that Cypress gives, and now you can run it through here. So you all are working in Exercise, you come to Exercise, and now you can be running your tests in here. And just leave it, you can just leave it up. When you save the file, it'll automatically run your tests. How are we going to check that the link is correct? Clicking a link isn't actually necessary to validate that a link is correct. The reason why that is the case is the clickability of a link is actually a browser behavior. So if it's a link, then clicking it doesn't actually test anything particular to our application. Instead, right, it's just extra time lost to perform an action and then to validate that we navigate to the correct URL. So what we actually want to do here is check the href attribute, because that is what tells us where it's going to navigate. If it's wrong in our application and then we click it, now it takes me to the wrong URL. And so this is the only thing that we actually care about in terms of the link. So you'll be in continuing your exercise. I'm going to start coding the solution here. GitHub Copilot, highly recommended. It'll make your life even better. But look what it's doing for me. So that's the right command. And then here, and let's see if, and hilariously, GitHub Copilot even filled in the URL for me correctly as well. So yeah, it's a super cool tool. This is the right kind of assertion, because if I said like contain, you know, like if I said contain, it should automatically be run. There it's run. Oh, it's going to fail again. Ultimate QA should equal. Okay, and let me show you all the typical workflow, how I usually work with Cypress. And actually I don't, yeah, just put them side by side like this. There you go. All right, let's save it now. So that the other cool thing I like about Cypress, when you save it, it'll automatically rerun the tests. So there you go. You can see a link goes to the ultimate QA, right? It visited our base URL that's in our Cypress JSON. And then we expected that our app link has the attribute href, and that value is equal to correct. So a lot of times when we talk about clicking a link, not only are people trying to validate whether it goes to the right location, sometimes they want to validate that it opens in a new tab. And so in order to do that, we can actually write a totally separate test. And the tab ability is just simply working with the target attribute. Here you can see that our link has this target, and this target is underscore blank. So if I'm just clicking it, it automatically opens in a new tab. Okay, so if I remove this target and there is no target, and then I click the link, you'll see that it opens up in the exact same tab. And so that's basically how you would validate that. So now your exercise is to write the same test in Cypress, and by implementing the last and third test. In this test case, right, we only cared about the URL. So there is kind of two ways to go about it. You can write the automated test and do what we did by one time ensuring, you know, that this URL is correct, right? So now we know, okay, this pulls up our page, so we can add it to our test. We're good to go. That URL shouldn't change. The other way to do it is, if you don't want to be worried that for whatever reason at some point this URL can start returning a 404, you write a separate test, and that separate test would simply just be a get of this URL that ensures it returns a 200. It's basically ensuring that our application looks as we want it to look, right? It's like a combination of manual testing and functional testing. The way typical end-to-end flows work is we have a test suite that runs. There's a command for visual testing that are called from the suite. Screenshots are rendered in the browser, and then those screenshots are compared against the baseline. The baseline is the one time you have to manually set a baseline and say, hey, this is acceptable to us from this point forward. Use this baseline in future test executions. If changes are detected, we have to decide, is it a bug, or is it a feature, or is it something else? And then we review changes, accept, reject, and repeat. That's how visual testing works. Example, this is my website in one resolution, right? So the question is does it look correct? Is it like how I expect it to be? What about if we start moving into a mobile resolution, right, where a hamburger menu comes up? Now, does this look correct? And then if you weren't doing visual testing, how would you validate that this is looking correctly? Also, how would you validate that this is looking correctly on Chrome, but then also Safari, which has a totally different browser rendering engine? And so that's where I feel visual testing is basically a mandatory thing for everyone doing web testing. I actually, when I test web applications, the majority of my testing is component tests, visual tests, and then I have some like front-end performance and some accessibility tests. For this website here that I created, this was all tested visually, combined with some component tests and so on. And so you can see how like the behavior of it changes, right? This is like, and you can see even it changes here as we keep scrolling down. And actually there's a bug here. I'll show you guys the bug right there. You know, how would you validate something like this without running your application on multiple browsers? And even here, this lack of separation here that I need to fix, you know what happens. And so this is very hard to validate functionally, right? With a functional end-to-end test, you're not going to be able to spot something like this unless you're actually checking for it. That's the problem with functional tests, in that they only check what you want them to check. And then of course there's the mobile view, which the question is this valid or not? It happens a lot when scaling browsers to mobile. No, it works better now, but before what would happen is at a certain resolution, this button would like drop down here. And so one button would be up here, the other one would be down here. And it's a very common kind of issue that applications. So not super critical bugs, you know, some can be very critical, others not. Depends on the needs of your application and depends on how much traffic your application is getting. Come with me to this file here in test specs, visual exercise spec, and then paste in the following code. So we'll do it together. We're working with WebDriver.io. WebDriver.io tests go into here, test specs, and then we have this visual exercise, right? So we're gonna paste in this code here, just like that. And then, so we're basically using WebDriver.io syntax, which says in this describe block, let's call my app, I'm gonna call it exercise. And then here you give the test a name. I'm saying it should look correctly. Okay, this is using WebDriver.io 7, so it's async format. We're navigating to a browser URL. I'll show you the config in a moment. And then the way we actually do visual testing with screener configured is basically we start a session of snapshots. That's this command right here. It's just a JavaScript execute command. And I'm saying my React app, I'll call it exercise. And then we just take a snapshot. So in this case, because we are on localhost 3000, it'll just capture a snapshot of that current page that we're on. And we can say, I'm calling it homepage. And then we're ending the test. At this point, when you end the test, the algorithm is going to kick into play, and then it will basically analyze our test for pass or fail. Here's the WebDriver.io config, right? You can see here, there's these visual options that are created. That what the important thing here is the project name. I'll show you that. how that correlates, passing in some source options. You'll put it, if you have your environment username and access key saved in environment variables, it'll be able to read it. If not, you would hard code it in here, hard coded it down there. And then we are basically telling our application to run on this combination of browser OS and viewport size. This viewport size is the most popular viewport size in the world currently. 28% of the world uses it. So that's why I picked that. Again, depends how you want to target your application. This is how that would work. And then the URL, of course, for the base URL is set right there. That's how we are able to do this right here. Okay, so with that, I say give these tests a run. Again, if you have a demo account, you might get a failure. But if you already have an account, then it should work. And let me start my app. So make sure your local host is running. And then I'll show you all the UI of visual. Cool, so here comes there's localhost 3000, and then let me start the WebDriver IO tests. So you'd run them like this. I already created a script for you called test visual. What that looks like is this. It's just a command pointing to our file, which I guess won't point to exercise. Let me see. Points to anything visual. So it'll run solution and exercise. Now that it's running, let's go take a look at the UI and see what that'll look like. So if we go to here, it's Screen IO. This is where I think I saw the visual bug. Let me see here. Just to check. Yeah, see that? Again, not a huge deal, but these kinds of bugs are everywhere. So if you're not checking for them, your app, has them. You can see this is our project that we put in the WebDriver IO config, and then it's running the tests here. So the very first time you capture a snapshot, it would come in a new state. Actually, I do want to show that. There we go. So one new state. So whenever the first time we run a test, our snapshot comes in a new state. So you can see the resolution here, and then Chrome Windows 10. You can see the naming conventions that came from our tests. And then this is what our app looks like in those parameters. So now it's for us to decide, does this look correct or not? Obviously, it looks really good. So we're going to accept it and use this as a baseline. And so now every future execution will check against this to see if something has changed. And I'll show you all what changes look like. Here's what happens when there's changes, right? So here's 250 snapshots captured. Here, there's 4 changed. Let's go and review those 4 changed. Here's what an example change looks like, right? So you can see before, this was our UI. Now this is our UI. So is this a bug or is this a feature? I don't know. It's something we need to figure out. If it's a bug, we would reject it, and this test would keep failing until it was fixed. If it's a feature, then we accept it, and now this new version would be used as a baseline. There's better examples of this too. Before, visual testing tools weren't very good. Nowadays, all the visual testing tools that I know, they have some smart algorithm behind the scenes that makes visual testing not flaky. And so in this perfect example, you can see that in this case, we actually had this header removed. But instead of classifying the entire page as changed, it's only classifying this item here. And it's saying, hey, you had this div was deleted. It had a structural change. And so that's the only thing, even though this entire page was shifted up, this is the only thing that gets identified. Now, again, for us is to decide, is this correct? Is it not? But we can even take it to the next level and say, in the future, I don't even care about this item. I can ignore it. You can ignore here through the UI. And now future executions won't care about that element. Or you can also start ignoring it through code as well. Great example for that is maybe you have a header in your application with like a sale and a countdown timer. Maybe you just want to ignore that in all of your snapshots. You can set that in your code, ignore that header in every single snapshot that you take. We're just going to make it run in CICD. Just follow along with me here. So you got your fork. Here's my fork, right? You got yours in your GitHub. Cool. Are gonna come to actions and click actions. If you're enjoying this tutorial and want to support this channel, be sure to hit the thumbs up button for the video. And if you want to be notified of every time a new tutorial is released, hit the subscribe button. You're going to come to new workflow and click new workflow. GitHub Actions provides us a bunch of pre-configured workflows, which is super helpful. So we're going to click configure Node.js because that's what we're using, right? So we're going to click configure, and it already has a bunch of stuff. I believe that you would be able to just run this and it would work, but we want to go beyond this. We're going to make this much better using all the test code that we've written, right? So there's this file here that I want you to copy and paste from. Here's that YAML file. I already pre-created it. So go to that YAML file and copy and paste this whole thing. So I'm coming here and I'm copying this, copy raw contents, coming here, and we're just going to paste over all of this, okay? Paste over that. Okay, this is what it looks like. Give it a name, you know, whatever. You can even leave it. We'll leave this name, doesn't matter. We'll just remember it's called Node.js YAML. And then here we have our username and API keys. Here we're saying that on push and pull request, we are going to run this file. So whenever we are pushing to main and doing a pull request to main, this file is going to run. Okay. So all of this was basically what GitHub Actions already gave us. I just basically modified it a little bit and said run on only version 16. You can run on multiple node versions. Super powerful. Okay. So that's what that does. And now we start actually doing our testing of our application. So step one, we are going to install our dependencies. So npm CI is used specifically for running in a CI environment. And what it actually does for our web application is our application, when we've been testing it, when we do npm start, that's called a build version of the application. So if you come, I don't have it here. I'll show you here because I have React tools enabled. So see here, I got my React tools enabled. And then if I click it, it's saying this page is using development build of React. This is not the production version that you want to ship. What you actually want to ship is when you do npm run build. And so what that creates is it's going to create a build folder here in our source code. And then that build folder is only going to contain the stuff that we need to actually ship the application. So see here, it's creating that build. This is what gets shipped to production. Okay. And so npm CI does the same thing, just meant for CI. It's faster in CI. Okay. And then we're building the app. And then here we start the app, right, using npm start, as we've seen before. But then this here will wait for the application to actually start before proceeding to the next action. And then here, we're going to run our functional UI tests. CICD was just running our Cypress tests, not that they're actually testing our application. And then after that, we're running our visual tests using the visual command. And so when we execute all of this, so you can just come here to your new file. You can start a commit, but it's going to fail, but let it fail. It's okay. So we're going to commit new file. And now we added it and it's going to start running. And the reason it's going to fail is because we don't have our environment variables configured. And so let's go and configure those. So to configure your environment variables, go to settings and then secrets and then actions. And then here you are going to want to add a new repository secret. Okay, so this is the same thing as configuring environment variables in Gitpod or in localhost, right? And so you'll set your source username, source access key, and your visual key, okay? And then you add it like this. And then at the end, you're going to end up with 3 keys with their corresponding values. When I went back to the code, notice this yellow circle here. This is our CI running now. We can click it. You can see there's 3 CIs running. The reason why that is because I had 2 already prepared to test my own repository, one for the demo, and now one we just added. So we can see here, it just finished executing. We got a green check mark, meaning it's all good. And here you can see everything. So here, for example, it's starting the app. And you can see it started on localhost 3000. Here, running functional tests, right? This is with Cypress, just an example of doing that. You can see it ran the tests, it ran some of our API tests, right? And then it ran some more API tests. And then we executed visual tests using the same command as before. And here is the CI command that I used. I find it very helpful to have special commands for CI, because in CI, we want more logging. We can see all of that here. You can see information, and then just post checkout actions and then completing a job. Thanks so much for tuning in into today's tutorial. I've been Nikolai Volodkin, and now I got a question for you. What do you want to learn next? Definitely go ahead and comment down below. I read every single comment, and I will create a list, and I'll turn that list of requests into tutorials. And as always, if you want to keep up with me, you can follow me on Twitter for amazing dev quotes, and you can also follow me LinkedIn for professional connections. And if you want to learn how to test better in a weekly newsletter format, you can grab the link to that down below. Thanks so much, and have an amazing day.